This is Bryan Wolff for Real Review, and today I have with me Maya Mann. Maya Mann is an artist, recently on view in the Whitney in New York with her piece "A Realistic Day in My Life Living in New York City." I'll let you describe maybe your art in a second yourself, Maya, but I would, I guess, describe it as extremely in conversation with the internet. But I feel like calling you an internet artist or a post-internet artist or any of these labels doesn't fully make sense. But maybe you have your own thoughts on that. And I also wanted to shout out Heart Space, which is a space you ran until 2025. It ran for like a year.
Yeah, spring 2025.
Yeah, Maya Man, welcome to the podcast. You're the first guest actually on the Real Review
Oh, really?
podcast.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm very honored. Well, this is exciting because I'm obsessed with the word real in my work, which is in the title of the piece you just mentioned. So it's all very aligned. Yeah, I'm an artist based in New York. I'm in my studio in Soho right now. And I would also describe my work as very much in conversation with the internet, of course. I mostly make work about the performance of self online, contemporary identity culture online, but that manifests in a variety of ways. But I mostly build generative systems, either through software or working with generative tools to make the work.
Yeah, and we wanted to talk to you today about the mood. So the reason were the first guest in a way is because yeah, we started to do a new sort of format for the podcast where we try to do a series of episodes around each physical issue of Real Review. And since 18 just came out, hopefully arriving at bookstores and in people's mailboxes as we speak, we like this idea of before we get into conversation with some of the contributors of the new issue to talk to somebody in our sphere of thinkers and people that we admire um, to review the mood in a sense and to get sort of an outside perspective on the mood we established for this issue. The mood for this issue is pretending the world, and yeah, my first question is kind of what was the first thing that pretending the world made you think of when you heard that this was the mood for the issue?
I think it's perfect for right now. Obviously, if I had to describe the mood du jour, it's definitely about AI and the instability of reality and panic related to all of that. And so I see pretending the world in kind of two dimensions. One, I am very interested in performance, which comes through in a lot of my work, and this kind of separation between the what you externalize and what you view as your internal self. It's something that I've struggled with basically for as long as I can remember, because I always felt very haunted by the feeling that I was pretending in my own life, and performing all of the time. And for context, I grew up as a competition dancer, which also relates to my most recent body of work. It involves AI video too, but I've been, yeah, thinking a lot about it in that dimension. And then, of course, pretending the world, I think of it in the realm of AI and the way that um kind of the performance of media and its effectiveness and what is seen as real has been really destabilized over the past couple of years with the introduction of generative AI via text and also image and video. So all of that combined makes the issue topic something I'm very interested in. But I think we're reaching there's kind of this heightened um panic right now around the idea of pretending, and people are feeling very afraid of losing grip on the quote unquote real. So,
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, I'd love to get into that a bit more because, yeah, I know your background indeed as a competition dancer. And I think this was in another interview or something. I heard you talk about that as well. And about, um, yeah, this sort of like already back then thinking about, real and reality television, the internet being real. Um, I mean, you said you struggled with, this idea of like, am I pretending? Am I performing? And I feel like you've been working so head on with that topic. Like, how do you see, you know, sort of like, do you see now pretending as a sort of natural thing? Like, is your point of view more like, oh, actually, we're all pretending and that's fine? Or I don't know, how is your point of view on that pretending kind of change from those dense competition days to now?
Yeah, I mean, my view, and I think this has a lot to do with the concept of authenticity, which comes up a lot too in these kinds of conversations. But my view is that you're always performing and you're always pretending, quote unquote, in some way. But I don't see that as performative parentheses derogatory. Like I think it's being performative is a very natural part of existing. And I think that media, images, video, text has always been about performing and about like posturing in some way and about communicating something. And I think the introduction of generative AI, it's such a radically new tool that's accelerating at a pace that is very scary, but I think it's still very much tethered to the history of technology and image making. And I don't see it as such a radical departure from the way that technology has previously disrupted media production. So I mean, it is radical, but I think there's a lot of sensationalism that is in the conversation that kind of need not be so separate from, like, the hindsight that we have with new introductions to technology and media production, so, yeah, but I think that pretending is it's it's part of the process of living inevitably, and people kind of have this fear around this idea of things being fake because it's seen as morally bad for
Mhm.
something to be fake. But I think more things are quote unquote fake in the way that we define it than we imagine them to be, but I don't think that's morally bad, if that makes sense.
Fake is real.
Yeah, like film is
Yeah.
fake. Like, like everything is staged and produced. The self is staged and produced, but that doesn't mean that you're not real. That's just in my opinion what it is by definition. So
Yeah. I mean, this idea that like, well, LLMs are just, sort of uh, listening to what we want and then giving us what we want, or they're like kind of, you know, pretending as well. Like, that is how humans learn as well. Like especially when we're younger, but I think to this day, like we look out to the people around us and we try to tell what they want and what they want from us and how they want us to react. And that's how you learn language. At least it's from, an outside point of view.
yeah, no, I totally agree. And I also feel like I very recently this past year turned a corner in my practice, my relationship to thinking about AI too. I think like many other people, I previously was very and I still am afraid of it in some ways, but I think right now to me it feels so exciting and pressing to engage with it and deal with these big questions that it's bringing up too. Yeah.
Yeah, it brings in all, I mean, the responsibility of who should use it or not use it, or these sort of like, um, what kind of agency lies in those decisions is a whole nother conversation as well, I think. And like, also just something very hard to untangle, and everybody should decide for themselves where they want to make that battle. But I also think that clearly there are, um, realities that are out of our hands and affordances that we would be foolish not to at least, if it's gonna give us so much that we can't control, we should at least try to get something out of it that we can, if where that makes sense. Um, so I'm curious, you know, have you like how is your relationship with pretending changed, maybe in your practice, but also just in life? Like, now that you have this other sense of like, oh, pretending is still real. Um, I'm just kind of curious, like how how do you feel like that's affected how you are in the world? Like, do you pretend more, or like what kind of freedoms have that given you, or like, I don't know, new discoveries of ways of being?
I guess I think about it often in the realm of fashion. This is probably the easiest way to talk through how I think about it in my life, but, you have the idea in theater or film of costuming, like wearing something a character would wear that is not necessarily what the person who's playing them would wear. But I think about this a lot with personal style and how sometimes I buy something new and then I start wearing it and then I'm wearing it around and I meet someone, like whatever, normal day. And I think, oh, they don't know that this is like new for me. They're engaged, like I'm wearing this, I'm testing it
Wait,
out.
but you feel that they don't know? Because I often feel that people do, like, I walk around when I buy something new with this feeling of everybody can tell, which I know is also fake, but
Yeah.
I have this feeling where I'm like, everybody, because I walk around different. I feel like I pretend,
Right.
I'm putting on a different performance, and I feel like people can tell. But most people probably wouldn't tell the difference, obviously, especially if they don't know you.
Exactly. But that's exactly the kind of the um rupture that I'm interested in is that you think everyone can tell, but for the most part, I think you can tell when someone is wearing something that's wearing them more than they're wearing it. Like, it doesn't
Oh
it's like,
yeah,
it's not working, and I can feel that with myself too. Like, I have bought
yes,
many things that I aspire I'm like, "Oh, maybe this will be my new self." I will, like, buy it, and it's cool, and I wear it, and, like, just the entire time I'm wearing it, my body and, like, my entire being is screaming, like, "This is not right." Like, this is not who you are.
yeah.
But I've had the opposite experience too, where I buy something and it's out of the context maybe of what I how I usually style myself, and but then it totally works, like, it feels great on. So I think both things can be true, but realistically, um, that that is not necessarily, being perceived by other people. But really what I'm interested in with this idea of pretending, like, the first step whenever you buy something and you take it for a test run, you wear it out, you're always pretending that it's, like, part of your sort of personal style lexicon naturally, and then you can learn whether it is or isn't, but sometimes you pretending that it is, or you acting like you're used to wearing it and like it's natural, does become natural, and then becomes actually attached to your self-concept. I'm trying to use this as an analogy for I think basically becoming a person is about you constantly are trying things out and you're constantly pretending that you're the type of person that you want to be, but then you slowly sort of close the gap between how how you think of yourself and that aspirational idea of yourself, but also it's very the gap between who you are and who you aspire to be is kind of this constant like reckoning that happens. But I think, like, all of life is about everyone is pretending, and then you, like, attach things to yourself or detach things, and identity is very much a collage and very much in constant flux. So
It's incredible. I mean, you basically just recap the thesis of the magazine as well, and like the angle of pretending the world, and at least in the way that Jack wrote it up in the mood on the back of the magazine, which is basically to say that like societies, as well pretend until they become something else. And this is, I think, I think I brought it up in another episode recently, and Jack told me where it's from, but I forget again where it's from. But it's basically, humans, when we want to go to sleep, we lay down and pretend like we're already asleep. That's how we get to sleep.
that's funny, yeah.
And that's kind of how a lot of things in life work. And indeed, from a personal point of view to entire societies and civilizations, which includes like larping an empire, is a article in this issue that shows how the American empire like pretended itself into being. It pretended to be an empire until it was that empire, and like you said, close that gap. Um so it seems like, yeah, a lot of things can work like that. I'm curious, with your point of view, like, there's sort of the infamous, like, once Facebook forced everybody to use their real names on the internet, the part of the internet where we got to pretend maybe more so than today kind of got lost. Like, the internet is a space where you weren't forced to take on or bring any of your quote unquote real identity into it. Um, Obviously, that room for play has been recaptured in different ways and forms by different sort of quote unquote subcultural movements online. But how do you in a sort of mainstream way almost, or I don't know, like just friends around you, people around you, like where do you feel like that is kind of going? Like where are people still daring to pretend and play with identity in that way to forge a new society? Or like you said also about AI, like are we in a moment that is very kind of scared, and are we maybe more so holding on to this fake idea of realness instead of a real idea of fakeness?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of social media, like via the evolution of Facebook to Instagram to all of that, I think that the pressure to perform or feel valid in performing online has been heightened through the kind of culture of optimization and this like constant gamification of living that has rendered everyone's online performance hyper professional and cleansed.
Right, and it has to be, you're right, because there's, like, so much like, everything now has to be a talking head video, otherwise the content doesn't work, and and that is obviously such a performance, but it does feel like a very stilted performance, like, it has to be, like, quote, unquote, "real," or it has to be, like, you as yourself, not as a character.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't believe there was ever a time where everyone was authentic on the internet. I just think there was less everyone was less optimized for the vectors that we or like the reward functions that essentially dictate etiquette on something like Instagram now. Um, so now it's become very heightened, but I think we've always been performing even when things felt more casual, because I think there's you can't escape the feeling of performing online ever, but I do think,
But
like
again, performing for who is the question, and now
yeah.
it's not for who, but for what. Like we're not performing for each other anymore online. We're performing for the algorithm, really.
Yeah, and that's also something that's so interesting to me when people talk about the algorithm and kind of personify the algorithm, where people say things like, "Oh, posting my face for the algorithm." I'm always
Guilty. I just did that the other day.
Oh, really? Okay, well, then this is perfect because I it's not that the algorithm likes faces, it's that people like faces. And the algorithm is designed to index, like, like, uplift content that people like. And so it's always interesting to me that, kind of way that actual personal preferences of people are then, like, abstracted uh, to to be defined as the algorithm, which is like it's not wrong. It's like the algorithm is what is the power that is like siphoning the content, but I think there's kind of this lack of people wanting to claim that we are somewhat responsible also for
You are the algorithm, brother.
yeah, like we are the algorithm. Like what do I like to see someone I follow post like stuff about their life? Like what stories of mine get the most views on Instagram? Like ones with personal content in it, like, like, stuff about like, things that are, like, exciting about my life or personal, and, that's really because people are more interested in that, but we also are kind of scared of what we're interested in, like, we don't like that we're interested in certain things we're interested in,
I
so
mean, that's a great point. I mean, it's definitely true, of course, that the algorithm has been shaped after what we were naturally gravitating towards anyway. And then it grows to a point where now there isn't a choice anymore. Now it's sort of like, yeah, the videos that perform the best were the ones with a face in it, but now it's they perform the best because the algorithm serves them and there is no other choice. Like there could still be an alternative performance, but now the algorithm is so skewed that it seems, it has decoupled from the human preference to become sort of like singular. It's sort of like the thing, I mean, I think Hollywood, for all its faults, has been an hopeful story this year to me, or in the last 2 years, where as formulaic as that industry tries to be with like Marvel and these kind of things, there's been a real clear signal from audiences that they don't want the formula and that they want original storytelling. They're going to back rooms, they're going to Obsession instead of like the 17th Marvel movie. Um, so there is still a lesson there, I think, in yeah, like what is it we want? But indeed, I mean, it's I think it's a good point. Like we are the algorithm, and there is sort of a human preference that we don't want to fully see either. Um,
Yeah, that's true. Actually, also, I think that um there yeah, there is some I don't want to misconstrue that it's like people have the power to change things. I don't really.
no, no, no. That's also not what you said. I think it's good though to say that like the source of the algorithm is not just like it wasn't thought up in the abstract of like what we're gonna do. We're gonna make people look at people even if they don't want to. It's like no, we want to look at people. That's yeah.
Yeah, but even it is true, like, with Hollywood and everything, like, there is this, like, people with power take notice of what what the masses desire, which I think is interesting when you think about how to kind of push against slop in the way that it manifests in entertainment industries and mainstream media and, um yeah, that there is this, potential for choices to, like, veer things in a way of, like, mass consumers, which is interesting, so, yeah.
Do you see at any because in that way there is sort of a there's always the feeling of like well hopefully we're still the pendulum always swings and like you see in Hollywood hopefully with social media that will happen as well in some way like people will push back people will find a way to do things differently. I I find it hard to see that at the moment, but I'm curious if you've seen any signals or any people or things on social media that are sort of bucking that trend of like just giving in to the talking head videos and just turning themselves into this sort of like the person into a star kind of thing as also you talk about and react on with a realistic day in my life living in New York City. Like that is very much engaging with that format, and I'm kind of curious, like, as somebody at the forefront of these formats, do you see another format already bubbling, or are we gonna like just be in this for a while and like this is kind of just, quote unquote, the reality for now?
Ooh. Okay, something that comes to mind I'm kind of interested in that I struggle with, I don't fully know I haven't reconciled how exactly I feel about it right now, but the advent of Substack and this, like, personal system for blogging where people are kind of writing, like, crazy, like, good, some very not great, needs an editor, like, but just this range of, like, cultural critique is really, really interesting to me, and I
Mm.
think that there is this ongoing discourse that's happening on there that is really fascinating to observe, but I also see, like, a lot of it revolves I mean, there's so many different pockets, it's hard to talk about it in a sweeping generalization, but, um, yeah, I think there is this
Is that a sort of text revenge on the image kind of thing, or
I think it's, like, a place for reaction and criticism, and I guess I read criticism and discourse also on Reddit. Like, I think that there's this, um, where people are really trying to talk with each other and understand how they feel about mass culture and, like, entertainment that's coming out, pop music, films, like, um, AI and I think that, um, I guess on those 2 platforms, I'm interested that there is discourse happening in a way that I feel like has completely left or, like, it's, like, poisonous now on, like, Twitter/X, and it's n like, Instagram is like LinkedIn, and, but I think back to what we were kind of saying before of, like, public thought I guess what I see happening on those platforms is, like, people, like, taking on, like, public opinion and trying to shape it with, like, their argument kind of without much, like, they don't have a big company behind them necessarily. They don't have, like,
Mm.
um, a reason to be promoting this or that necessarily unless they do, but, like, there's a lot of people are just talking, and I think that's
Yeah.
really, fascinating to me and something I've been really enjoying, I guess. So
No, it's interesting. I mean, it's actually, now that you say it, it's kind of fascinating. I mean, there's so much discourse about the, is the image over, like, Spike, how to talk about it, and like I feel like there's been a lot of like kind of like the image is dead. We're in a post-image age, um, and that, usually gets kind of invoked, I think, because of the capabilities of AI, and like you can't believe any image anymore, and but like the same goes for text, if not more so. Like I still feel like, I mean, I guess it depends on who you ask. And yeah, I guess I don't exactly know if I think that images are more easily replicated with AI than text, but I don't think that the answer to the death of image is necessarily that text is such a better way to like quote unquote capture the real. Um, but it is the reaction, which is interesting, that we're sort of like, and again, maybe that's just a pendulum swinging after, having been in such a visual culture for a decade with Instagram, to go to a more textual kind of moment.
yeah, I've been thinking so much about that, painting is dead, images are dead, like, this kind of cyclical argument that comes back time and time again, but I've been thinking about lately, kind of the reframing of it or what it would not that I necessarily agree with this reframing yet, but it's interesting to me to think about the reframing that, like, I think a lot of the introduction of new technologies, like photography in the mid 19th century, like, I think painting was freed. Like, painting
Mm,
became something totally it was not before, it was liberated,
mm.
and I'm kind of curious what that looks like for images and text. I don't have an answer, but I think that there is some when it becomes so easy to do something that was previously so hard, what it does artistically to a medium, I think is so exciting, actually. Um,
I mean, that's again an interesting point of like, is it almost like, have people started, is Substack taking off because not necessarily because everybody's just, generating essays with AI, but like there are now indeed tools that revolutionize the ability of writing and make it easier for people to find words that they previously, I mean, they could use the thesaurus or these kind of things, but I think there's still, it's a different, it's a totally different speed of writing.
yeah, or even I mean, like, I think, like painting was freed from trying to be from, like, realism ruling, essentially, and I think
Mhm.
that like, the writing that's exciting to me now is very deliberately written to not sound like AI. Like, I don't think more
Yeah,
people should
yeah,
use AI for writing necessarily, but I think writing that is explicitly because AI tends to sound very academic, very stiff, and so I think writing that doesn't do that is kind of has sort of new cachet. I think that kind of like, more alternative literature's always had that, but I think there's something to that that, like, now, like, these forms are being defined by being not only what they are, but also distinctly not AI.
yeah. I'm kind of curious, like, what is there any piece of writing that pops to mind just top of head of like that you've read recently where you're like, oh yeah, this I'm really driving with right now, or this is really like an example which you just said. I'm just kind of curious what it is.
This is okay, I'm, like, embarrassed, but when I keep telling people this, but this is what I'm reading. I'm reading Infinite Jest right now, and so
Oh
and
yeah.
so which obviously was written in the, mid-90s, and so but the thought I keep having reading it now in this cultural context is, like, it's so crazy AI can't touch this. It's insane. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
like, the way that it's written, like, the changing of styles and everything, and, like, um it's just so delirious, but also
Mm.
pointed and precise, and it's just something that AI AI couldn't, and I'm not sure could ever, which is feels good to, like, have something be like that. It's just, yeah. So something like I think that's kind of what I mean is, like, stuff that is so freaky, and, like, takes a method of thinking that is so kind of elaborate with intentions that are so um, outside of, like, productivity or, like,
Mm.
um
Or like the right answer. Yeah.
yeah, that is just, like, I think writing more in that realm, which is not to say just writing like David Foster Wallace specifically, but I think writing that's really experimental and ambitious in being experimental will hold even more value now that it's so easy to produce, like, boring academic writing.
I was wondering if you see, I mean, I really like, you talk about, I have this quote here where you say, "The shows all of that remixed and refracted through generative AI models, which scare and intrigue me because they are real, in the same way that reality television is real and the internet is real too." I'm wondering, like, obviously, I think you're such a great example of somebody that, um, not just exists in this way, but really actively, like, kind of, I think, puts it in perspective through your work as well. That there are no distinctions between our online lives and our real lives. Like, it's sort of all one thing. Um, but do you still, do you see a difference between like online pretending and offline pretending? Um, is there still a difference, and how's that difference taking shape today?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference, and I think one of the biggest differences that I feel strongly about is the asynchronicity of online performance. I'm stressed all day about performing in the physical world in real time, like, having social interactions with people, like, it's like, I'm anxious, like, but there's not I can only be a for me, like, it can only reach a certain degree because, like, we're having conversation, like, we're going back and forth, like, I gotta be
Fill
there.
the void.
I don't
Yeah.
really have so much time to make a decision about, like, what I'm gonna say next. I think what's one of the most radical differences to me is that you have virtually endless time to curate and cultivate the way that you come across online, and I think that's really the root of a lot of stress and anxiety about it, and so to me, like, they're not actually that different, but if I were able to put the world on pause while I'm at a party and think for an hour about what I'm gonna say next to someone or who to talk to, I'd be freaking out. Like, I'd be freaking out so much more and be like, "There's so many more options, like, oh, I could do this, or I could go over here, or, like, do this, whatever." But the time marches on in the physical world. You gotta act in real time, and I think online, having this endless time span to, you know, upload and delete and shape how you are, that you can ruminate on it forever, that is a really different process of creating a self that introduces a lot of anxiety, I think. So, even though I think they're both real, I think that to me is one of the most distinct.
Yeah, it says, like, it also is very self-reinforcing, because I think, the more, even though, you say also, like, you kind of prefer in a way um, to have the having to kind of keep going in real life versus the anxiety of like having so much time to then sit in that decision. But at the same time, I think a lot of us so, the more and more time we spend online, we are getting so used to having that time to curate that response, that then increases the anxiety of going into real life, because it's like, well, there, I don't have that time, so I'd rather just avoid that situation. Like, I do see that self-reinforcing function, and that is quite worrying, I think, because indeed, like, it's actually quite nice to be forced to just respond, and the less you do it, the more you want to do the other one that is actually way more uncomfortable. or just can stretch out the uncomfortability for way longer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think, people talk about stories versus grid on Instagram. Stories last for a much shorter amount of time and they feel less consequential. And so I think the time scale contributes a lot to the level of anxiety if you ever are posting.
Amazing. As we get to the end of this conversation, I was curious. I mean, a what are you pretending right now? What have you been pretending? and and maybe also like what are you working on? They can be the same question, but they can also be separate questions. Up to you.
Okay. I'm going to answer them with kind of the same answer because I think actually this sort of works. So I'm pretending that I'm really into music right now, which to be clear, I am really into music, but I'm really into pop music. And I think that comes across in a lot of the work that I make too. I'm very interested in mass culture and mass media, and but I think recently I've really lost touch with feeling like I'm into music. Like I'm making I don't know, listening more intentionally, really making an active effort to listen to a wide variety of artists and releases and things that are coming out. Um and I've enjoyed for a long time, years listening to or like reading pop music criticism. But my next body of work, over a few series of projects will focus on, pop music and pop stars, and so I am pretending to be maybe even more into the general landscape of music than I am usually, and I think I was a little hesitant at first because people who are into music are, like, into music, and it's like a source of pride and, like, you there's all the like, "Oh, you have this level of knowledge or you don't," and so I'm pretending that I'm into music, and it's working, and I am.
Amazing. There we go. Pretending reality. Yeah.
I'm thinking a lot about the construction of the persona in music, like, through pop stars and idols and that type of thing, so
Amazing. Um, that's it for this episode. Thanks so much, Naya. Anything else you want to plug? Anything people? Where can people go check your work out? For some reason, I was under the misassumption, or had sort of felt like the Whitney thing was still up, but then I just saw before the call that it isn't obviously anymore. Is there anything out in the world that people can go see? Any URLs?
yeah, you can find my work at mayaontheinter.net. Wait, when is this podcast coming out?
Probably like tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a quick turnaround.
Okay, okay, cool. Well, there'll be some not the shows are not yet announced, but there'll be some net art action at the Whitney this fall. So if you're in New York City
Amazing.
in the fall, come to and you're a net art head, come to the Whitney. Yeah.
And keep an eye out on Maya on the inter.net for these announcements. Maya, thank you so much for reviewing the mood with me. Was a real pleasure.
Thank you, Brian.